And we're live. Welcome to a brand new episode of Law and Batting Order, live Q&A style. I'm your host, Tony Oikostas. Thank you for joining us on this Sunday, full of NFL football, of course, but as you know, we do set time aside to discuss some sports law issues here on Law and Batting Order and any other issue that comes to be in the sports industry. And I'm very excited about today's Q&A. I'm joined by a very good friend of mine, Mark Burns, who is a Forbes.com contributor. He's also an editorial assistant for USA Hockey Magazine. He's a jack of all trades, graduated from law school as well. What doesn't he do? Mark, welcome along. How you doing?
Hey, Tony. What's going on? Thanks for having me.
So anyway, thanks for coming along. Actually, I have an echo. Hold on a second. No, there we go. Okay. Had the YouTube page going on as well. But anyway, thanks for coming along, Mark. So as we discussed, as I've marketed, of course, throughout the week, we'll be talking about social media and sports. It seems to be, as of late, the biggest marriage that has come to be since peanut butter and jelly. It's been a revolutionary situation how social media has integrated so well with sports, and I'm just marveled at how continuously social media are evolving. And this is coming from someone who was a communications major back at Fordham. I can definitely speak to how communications has evolved over time. And Mark, I know this was a topic that you wanted to talk about on the Q&A session during this half an hour. And by the way, for anyone who's curious, you feel free to chime in and share all that you want. If you have any questions about social media and sports, please feel free to tweet it at us. We have a hashtag for this chat, LABO with MB. So feel free to chat and share your questions. Mark, I want to start first. You know, you've been covering this issue or covering this topic for some time on Forbes and on other websites. What's your take on social media? Is it a double-edged sword? Are we seeing more benefits and disadvantages using social media in sports? What's been your general take on the whole thing?
Well, I think it's definitely, been beneficial, and you're seeing more teams and athletic departments. I mean, nowadays, if you don't have a Twitter, if you don't have a Facebook, you're really behind the times. And I think I would be safe to say that of the, four or I guess five professional sports leagues, including the MLS, everybody's got Twitter and Facebook. I would probably say, that's 100%. And then kind of going from there, teams also have their YouTube page. They also have their Instagram accounts. And then kind of from there, I would say that the next kind of up-and-coming platforms definitely Vine and Snapchat. And Snapchat's kind of like the oddball right now, and people are still trying to figure out whether or not it fits into their social media strategy. Some teams that are pretty progressive, like I guess the New Orleans Saints, they were one of the first teams to kind of gravitate towards Snapchat and use that. Some teams will use it, but other teams that maybe they're the senior leadership, they don't believe in Snapchat fitting into their strategy. They maybe still see Snapchat as what it was originally created for, and maybe not wanting to go down that road. But I think Snapchat's really the one that teams are still trying to figure out. And even here at the USA Hockey office, at least not for the magazine, but for USA Hockey, for them, they still have a Facebook and Twitter. And I mean, they're always having daily conversations about what social media platform do we go on to next, where are our fans, where are USA Hockey members. So that's not to say that some platforms are for everybody, because they're definitely not, but Twitter, Facebook are definitely the ones that's where the conversation is right now, and people are still trying to even master those, and then kind of going from there, Vine and Instagram. So
that's an interesting situation that you brought up, because generically we're so accustomed to using Twitter and Facebook. That's been like the OG, so to speak, of social media. Or I would say MySpace was probably the original gangster. But it's phenomenal how it's branched out into other scenes. Social media, basically merging or growing from traditional writing, where you have with Twitter and Facebook, to video and photos with what you have with Vine and Instagram and Snapchat as that's becoming a new player. You had brought up how Snapchat is kind of the one platform that is becoming the one that's newer, but a lot of teams and leagues are starting to learn how to really use it effectively. What differentiates one social media platform from being used over the other? Is it capability? Is it that are they appealing to a different demographic of fan? What, if you were a team, what distinguishes you from using one platform as opposed to another? Is it a matter of taste, or is it some other X factor?
I would say for at least Snapchat, I mean, that's where you're probably 13-year-olds to mid-20s. That's where, I mean, there's a ton of people on that platform. And I would say that's where that demographic is, maybe even 10 years old to 25, or even stretching maybe late 20s. So if you want to grab maybe fans early in life, whether it's 10, 11, 12, 13 years old, you might want to get onto that platform. And I think the story function is very cool, where you can kind of put together a few different snaps and kind of send those out. And the click-through rate, just talking with people. I remember talking with a lady with the Philadelphia Eagles, head of their digital department, and she said that the click-through rate is 60-65%, which is kind of incredible to have. So I think, yeah, I mean, it just depends really, your demographic, also the capabilities and the functionality. So with like your Vine with 6 seconds, that's probably the hardest platform to kind of figure out, just because it's 6 seconds. You kind of have to get a very perfect video or perfect series of videos that you can kind of push together and create. So Vine's really, I mean, I wrote something on the San Francisco 49ers. They're working with a Vine artist from the Bay Area, which I think is pretty cool. They're putting a lot of time, energy, money, resources into just Vine. Last season, they really elevated their presence on Instagram. So this year, they wanted to put their focus towards Vine, and just seeing some of the things that they're doing on game day, in the week leading up to game day as well. So it's pretty cool what teams can do. And I mean, looking at their page, if you haven't seen their page, it's pretty cool to kind of check out and see what they're doing. It kind of leaves you scratching your head and kind of in a wow state of mind, really, just how elaborate their vines are. So yeah, a lot comes down to functionality, demographic, and also where are your fans.
Yeah,
so
that's true.
There's a few different things that kind of go into people's teams and the social media strategy and what platforms they're on. So just depends. I mean, a lot too, it depends on the team. Some teams might not want to be on Snapchat. Some think they need to be on it.
Yeah, it's a matter of taste. I've played around with a few of those. Snapchat is one of those I'm actually still toying around with. But I actually, for the heck of it, I tried out, I think it was a few Sundays ago, Snapchat had for the opening of college football, they had a whole story of I think, for Oregon fans, rooting for the Ducks. And it's actually really interesting because it's not more so of like, it's not like a here's an article, read it type of platform. It's let's tell a story about fans. Let's tell a story about how people get hyped up for game day. And I think it's a very effective tool in that way. And I'm sure as time goes on, some more teams will embrace not only Snapchat, but I'm sure other platforms that may come along the way in that regard. Something like Snapchat or even other new platforms that we don't even know about. One thing that I think is curious about social media, I think really sets it apart from everything else communications-wise, is that really the people's opinion matters. It doesn't seem to be the case where, back in the old days when you read a newspaper, the letter to the editor was the people's opinion, but it was one person's letter to the editor that finally made it in the newspaper. Whereas with Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, you name it, any sort of social media platform, everybody's opinion is broadcasted live. Everyone's opinion is on a thread and is visible for the entire public to see. Do you think that fans are far more able to interact better through social media than other forms of communication, other traditional forms of media? And do you think the people's opinion is really what makes the social media platform for like I guess when they integrate with a team or a league, does the people's opinion matter in that regard?
I definitely think so. I mean, if there would brands and teams, they wouldn't have if they didn't think fans or their consumers' opinions matter, they wouldn't have people monitoring their pages 24/7. I know at the World Cup, Adidas, they had their social media command center, and they had somebody monitoring their pages 24/7 just because, granted, the World Cup is on a different level of a sporting event. But even so, I think just having your social media team monitoring all your pages 24/7 around the clock, so that you can be there for your consumers, whether or not there's an opinion about a product, or maybe something going on in an event, or maybe they just want to comment on your page and voice their opinion about another topic. So definitely think fans feel like they're being heard. I think it just goes back also to teams and leagues. I mean, they have digital departments, they're fan engagement departments that are monitoring all this, and there's a reason for it. So I think fans would say now that they have all the platforms in the world to be heard. So whether it's Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, you name it. So
yeah, definitely. One thing that I think goes without saying, while we have so many advantages with social media, it's safe to say that it is a double-edged sword, where players can get in trouble with using social media, or even anyone else who uses social media. They can get in trouble if it's used in the wrong way. One example that comes to mind of one of the early social media users was Larry Johnson, the Kansas City Chiefs player who back in, I think it was 2009, when Twitter was just becoming a really big player in the social media world, was tweeting some homophobic comments and was bashing the team, and ultimately led him to getting cut by the Chiefs. And we sort of saw that trend of not only him, but other players sort of follow that lead, where they'll take to social media and use it as a sounding board to rant. And if they did it in the wrong way, it could cost them a contract, or from a business perspective, a sponsorship. You cover a lot of sports business issues on Forbes. How common is it now that we're going to see morals clauses in sponsorship deals integrate some type of sentence that says, if you use social media wrong, you're going to lose the sponsorship deal? Do you think social media platform is now becoming the negotiating point in a lot of sponsorship deals?
yeah, I would say it's in every. I mean, you talked about morals clauses. I think that they're probably in every sponsorship deal. You look at like a guy like who was it? Paul George a few weeks ago. He was commenting on the Ray Rice situation. I forget what he said, but he essentially was supporting Ray Rice to an extent. And then his tweets, I think he sent out 2 or 3, and they all got deleted eventually. But of course, anything that goes online, just because you delete it, it gets seen by millions of people, whether it's a screenshot or whatever. And I mean, I don't think it necessarily, that didn't affect anything that he currently has, any endorsements that he currently has. But for a guy that said publicly that he wants to kind of command endorsement dollars like your LeBron James, your Kevin Durant's, doing things like that on social media, I mean, it gives more power to the brands that want to align with you when when your team goes to them and says, hey, we'd like to maybe partner with you, and then they see this that you've done in the past. So you might not even get that deal. It might come at maybe a lower price, just because there's a little bit more risk there because of your past and what you do post on social media. So yeah, it's interesting. That's just one example that comes to mind. But yeah, social media, it's just integrated into everything now with sports. You look on Twitter any given night during the week, especially Monday Night Football, of the 10 trending topics, 7 or 8 are sports related. So yeah, I mean, athletes just have to be mindful of, social media is, people follow it all the time. And I'm looking at something now that I actually just stumbled upon earlier I wanted to mention. So a friend of mine that works at Fieldhouse Media, his name's Kevin DeShozo. He's a social media consultant. On his Twitter page, he's got something that says, it's for student athletes. He says, before hitting send, ask yourself, what can I gain from posting this? And also, what could I lose by posting this? And I think that doesn't only, it applies to student athletes, but it also applies to professional athletes who have their Twitter pages, who have their Facebook pages. And 140 character tweet can cost you dearly. So it's just being mindful of the do's and don'ts, and just being mindful of that.
Yeah, sadly, it's true.
Yeah.
I can certainly speak from experience having covered this on Law and Batting Order before. It's a matter of social media etiquette. What's the right thing to say? What's the wrong thing to say? One person had put it best. Would your mother want you to read that on social media? That's as weird as it sounds, you have to think about that type of question. I think part of the other problem is that I think certain players may not be educated well enough in terms of what's the right thing to tweet out, what's the wrong thing to tweet out. I think it's just a matter of being conscious and being smart and savvy. And as you said, it's just a matter of, would you be willing to lose everything because of 140 characters? So I think it's a matter of just being aware of what's the right thing to say on a very public forum like Twitter. And this goes for other platforms like Facebook and Instagram and wherever else. On the topic of athletes, though, I think one of the biggest headlines that we saw social media users really get into it, and where we saw the court of public opinion open for business, was with the Ray Rice situation with domestic violence. And I think it really ignited a really huge conversation about domestic violence, the dangers of it, just everything under the sun, how Commissioner Goodell should punish Ray Rice, even as the events continue to unfold about whether or not the tape was delivered. Ray Rice's 2-game suspension turned into an indefinite suspension, and then all the players being suspended after that. It's just you saw the whole slew of tweets, comments, everything, you name it, just really rolling down the timeline, and we really saw people interact and give their opinion openly on social media. How do you take an event like that, something as substantial as a notable superstar in the NFL being punished for a big incident? He committed a crime in essence he wasn't charged, but he hit his wife, and now the whole discussion of domestic violence has come to be and has now become a very relevant issue. How do you see social media being that court of public opinion? Are we really, you touched on this a little bit earlier about how really social media is becoming this platform for fans to really interact and be a part of the conversation. How does something as pivotal as the Ray Rice situation really illustrate that principle?
Well, I just think that based on that event, you were seeing, even just on my Facebook page, people just were chiming in nonstop. It got to the point where some people were, I hate to say this, but they were getting unfollowed on Facebook, because there was always a comment. They were saying something every day. Just after the TMZ, after that broke, maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, I think now. So I would see it on my personal Facebook page, and it got to the point, like I said, where it was just too much to an extent. But at the same time, I say that, but on Twitter, that's where I was kind of keeping track of everything going on. I guess to me personally, and I know a few other people that report on the sports business world, they're reaching out to sponsors and trying to get different statements on, where their company kind of lies with the NFL, and if no one said that they're cutting ties. Basically, it was, we're in a wait and see mode right now. Although some brands were kind of more forthcoming in their opinions and saying, hey, we're kind of disappointed in how the NFL handled this, and we're really watching this from a business standpoint and from a relationship standpoint with that. So I don't know, it was interesting. I was in the office during the second press conference 2 Fridays ago, I think, and I wasn't watching it live for whatever reason. I couldn't get the live feed, but I was just following it through Twitter, and that's where all these questions are coming in. And I know Rachel Nichols kind of stole the show, so to speak, because she was really holding the NFL and Goodell accountable. I think that's what kind of needs to happen. Is it would be, I don't think any sponsors, unless there is a cover up, I don't see any sponsors cutting ties. But I think it is good that reporters, and Rachel Nichols personally, she's they're holding the NFL accountable, and they're trying to ask these questions and get transparent answers. And at the same time, I think it's been tough for them, because the NFL really hasn't, I don't think they've been as transparent as people would like them to be regarding everything that's kind of transpired. But at the same time, I think the issue of domestic violence, not only, this isn't just even the NFL. I think I tweeted this out maybe last week, but domestic violence and the whole issue with child abuse with Peterson.
Yeah.
This isn't, these aren't NFL problems. These are societal problems that are kind of manifesting themselves in the league. And because of the NFL, and it's the biggest sports league in the U.S., most followed, they're under a microscope now, and how they're handling this is really being watched closely by all members of the media and also fans and sponsors and different brands. So, I mean, social media has been great because that's where I'm personally following this. I'm not necessarily going, even seeing things on TV. I'm following this on social media and specifically Twitter. So.
Yeah, definitely. I think Twitter's giving a pretty incredible commentary as these events continue to unfold. And I guess on the topic of Ray Rice and being that you are a fellow JD like I am, it would only be right to ask you, not from a pseudo-legal perspective, and I guess from a sports business perspective, since you've covered this issue and you've been tweeting out the whole Ray Rice saga as well as I have. Do you see Roger Goodell keeping his job? Do you think this is going to be contingent on sponsors pulling the plug, and ultimately that's going to compel Roger Goodell to step down? Do you think the Mueller report is going to be the smoking gun in the whole case? If you had to sort of map out a game plan, what do you think is in the future for the NFL from what's transpired as a result of the Ray Rice situation?
Yeah, so I mean, this is obviously all speculation, but let's say there was a cover up, and I know that the NFL the NFL supposedly there was a receipt that they got the video, right? And so that's the whole thing right now, is whether or not they actually got it and whether or not somebody saw it. So if there was a cover up, let's say there was a cover up, I definitely think sponsors. There's just got to be that one sponsor to pull the plug, like maybe a Pepsi or like a FedEx or some huge sponsor to pull the plug, and then there's going to be this domino effect of definitely conversations of other sponsors possibly pulling the plug too, but only then could I see him losing his job, just because of the cover-up, and also if his actions start affecting the bottom line of the league and also the 32 owners, that's when I think his job might be in jeopardy. But as of now, definitely don't think it is. He's kind of had overwhelming support from, Jerry Jones with the Cowboys and Robert Kraft with the Patriots. They've been kind of his two biggest allies, at least from the ownership side. So yeah, I mean, right now it's a wait and see game for everybody, really. But yeah, I mean, his job is safe for now. But if there was any signs of a cover-up, or if the investigation with Robert Mueller, the former FBI director, if they find an actual cover-up, then I think his job is in jeopardy. And even then, that's kind of that whole independent investigation. I mean, that's another kind of conversation, just because of his. I mean, that's a whole other topic.
Oh, tell me about it. Yeah, and I think the reason why it's a whole other topic, and I think it was Rachel Nichols who brought it up in the press conference.
Yeah.
Robert Mueller's firm has dealt with the NFL league front office, so yeah, it's a whole issue right there. If you had, so just reverting back to the whole social media conversation, and on the Ray Rice situation, I'm sure a lot more will play out as soon as the Robert Mueller report comes out. But touching back on social media, which league or team, or I guess maybe a mixture of both, who has really dominated the social media sphere the best? And I'm talking about maybe fan interaction, or really telling the story of what it's like to be a member of this team or this league. I guess maybe even having contests, or really just the whole story of creating a really pure fan experience. Who do you think has capitalized the best in that regard?
I think I would say, at least from a broader perspective, at least globally. I mean, the NBA is definitely the most global of the 5 professional leagues in the U.S. And I think they have the most followers. Like, if you just aggregate across all their different platforms, they have the most and have the most reach. But I guess I don't think I maybe comment on league, but definitely teams. I mean, you have like the San Francisco Giants are always in the conversation as being one of the most forward-thinking kind of organizations in social media. Same thing with like the LA Kings. They've done a really good job on Twitter and establishing this voice that I think a lot of teams are trying to mimic. They have kind of a snarky.
They're trolls.
Yeah, they have this snarky kind of trolling / sarcastic voice, and it was unique. But now other teams and other athletic departments are trying to really mimic that, and it kind of, I don't know, it kind of dilutes what the Kings did because people are kind of copying it now, but they are one of the first, I think, teams to really have a voice. So, I mean, them definitely for Twitter. I mean, I did that story on 49ers. Their Vine strategy over there, and they, like I said, that they got a Vine artist in the Bay Area, this guy named Ian Pagnum, who used to work for Twitter actually, but their Vine game is pretty cool. It's just crazy what they've come up with in 6 seconds, and they bring down Ian and his assistant, this guy named Charlie Love, and they're there for the entire game at Levi Stadium, and then they put all this content together, and it's really, like I said before, it leaves you in this wow state of mind, really, what they're doing in this short span of time. So I definitely think those two. I guess going to the college athletics, and even in pro sports, but college athletics, you're really seeing a lot of teams do these infographics now. So instead of like your formal box score, a lot of these college athletic departments, and specifically one that comes to mind is Miami University in Florida, with Chris Yandel and his team down there. He's now at Georgia Tech, but they were really one of the first teams I think or athletic departments that I really noticed that they're doing these infographics with football, men's basketball, I think they did, women's basketball, and also maybe baseball. But it's really this kind of engaging content that is so much different than the box score, and that it's really, they might have a few a few photos, some information, and it just really highlights the game in this very small kind of infographic. So I think that's something that's really starting to be universal, and that if teams aren't doing it now, they're really behind the 8 ball, because maybe 2 or 3 years ago it was unique, but now it's sort of expected in the college athletic world, I think even with pro sports. So I would say that. Trying to think of what else, what other like teams are definitely. I know, like, just because I went to the University of Michigan, I follow like their football page and their basketball page. They do a decent job of incorporating their sponsors into things. So I think that's also something that teams and athletic departments are always kind of they're having that conversation. Can we incorporate sponsors into this? And instead of it being like an ad, it's we're having a sponsor already in. How do I describe this? An athletic department is creating already their original content and having the sponsor kind of come along with it. It's not just an ad,
right?
Just a specific ad. So yeah, I would say those are a few teams and athletic departments that are doing some things well. I probably could list a few others, but at least those are a couple.
That's great. Yeah, good to put you on the spot there. But anyway, we do have finally a Twitter question. Yes. I got to give a shout out to my man Hakeem. Thanks for the question, Hakeem. So he asks, how will social media impact the way teams provide social media platforms for fans in stadiums and arenas? And we've talked about the 49ers. That's the example that he alludes to. And certainly the San Francisco 40Viners, I think that's their Vine group. They've definitely capitalized on that. But how do you think so, Mark?
Sorry, it was the question? How is it being integrated into stadiums and
arenas for the fans? So how will social media impact the way teams provide social media platforms for fans in stadiums and arenas, like we've seen with the 49ers?
Okay. I mean, you're seeing tons of teams now. I know, like Oregon State, I just wrote something on them. Seattle Mariners do this, but they pull in, and I think it's, like I said with the infographics, 2 or 3 years ago this was unique, but now if you're not doing it, at least with me, if I'm going to a game, I'm looking for this. I'm looking to see how are you bringing social media into the fan game experience. So I think pulling tweets, pulling Instagram posts, and having them on your jumbotron, having them on TVs throughout the arena or throughout the stadium. I think that having fans create your own content and then kind of showcasing that in the stadium, I think that is something that all teams are trying to figure out, and they're implementing right now. So like I said, the Mariners, I know Oregon State does this. I think the University of Michigan at their football stadium, they do this. I'm sure tons of pro teams, especially in the NFL, do this on Sunday. So I think that is, what you're seeing now. This is kind of I guess a side thing, but something that's pretty interesting. So like the San Francisco Giants, I think last year or the year before maybe, they had a opening day um, it wasn't opening day. It was the person throwing out the first pitch had to cancel or something, and this was maybe 5 or 6 hours before the game. And so they thought, how can we, who are we going to get, and how can we maybe, use social media to find somebody, right? So I think they used Vine, but they said,
Wow.
kind of craft an interesting Vine. I think of like you throwing out the first pitch or just an interesting Vine, and so they used Vine as the way to get or select somebody to throw out the first pitch, which I thought was just interesting. They basically got their fans to generate this content, and then they selected somebody from that. So I don't know. I think it's just being out of the box. It's or thinking outside, outside the box, being very forward thinking how you're using social media, and not being afraid to try something new. I think that's at least at some organizations, they're maybe not as wanting to do that, but for some teams and some athletic departments, it's definitely paid off. So
Definitely, and I know the Mets have slowly tried to do that. Struggling Mets fan, but yeah, they try to integrate social media somehow. Finally, this is a broad communications question. I'm a communications fiend, so it's an intriguing question that I'm sure you may have an answer to. Are we more content consumers or are we more content creators in this social media age?
I mean, for me personally,
Well, you're more of a content creator for sure.
yeah. Well, I mean, I write stuff and I also tweet stuff, but at the same time, I mean, I love just scrolling through my feed and reading, you know, what's like, for example, with the Ray Rice situation with the press conference, or just reading. If I go to certain people's feeds every day on Twitter, at least I know I'm going to get great content, and I'll get different stories or different facts or things like that. So, I mean, I guess it depends on. I mean, that's a tough question. I think it depends on if it's a individual person or if it's like a team or if it's like an athlete. I don't know. I know some of my friends, they're on Twitter and they have maybe 200 tweets, and they just love going on there and staying up on what's going on with their favorite pro team and what's going on in sports, and if they work in marketing, it's sports and marketing. Whereas me personally, yeah, like you said, I do a little bit of both. So yeah, I mean, it just depends. Yeah, I know. I couldn't give you an answer one way or another.
I didn't expect a bright line answer, but it varies person to person and always changes. But I think that's the beauty of social media. We've seen, especially with sports, how it's become so crucial. And much like yourself, I'm always out there looking through feeds and always educating myself. I may not have gone to business school, but in essence, I've definitely learned from others like yourself and anyone else who tweets out articles about sports business. I've slowly learned how the industry works, and sort of weaving in my own skill set somehow, so that I could sort of have some type of knowledge of how to integrate both the legal and the business side of things. But certainly, social media is a great tool. I hope that many people use it to their advantage as opposed to their disadvantage. So word to the wise to anyone out there, if you tweet something, just make sure that it's always on the internet forever. But anyway, Mark, thanks so much for joining me. Can you just sign off by telling people where to follow you?
Yeah, so I'm on Twitter, Mark J Burns 88, and I guess if you want to follow me on Instagram, I don't really post anything too much, but Mark J Burns, I'm on Instagram also. And if you want to email me, mark.j.burns, the number 2 at gmail.com.
And don't forget, he's going to be releasing an R&B album next week, and then after that, he's going to be running for senator. So just watch out for that. He's everywhere, people. But thanks for joining me, Mark. And you can be sure to follow me on Law and Batting Order on Twitter at LawNBO. You can follow Law and Batting Order at lawandbattingorder.com. Facebook is facebook.com/Law and Batting Order. And be sure to tune in next week for a brand new episode of Law and Batting Order, and we'll do another LABO live Q&A. And please feel free to continue sending questions. We'll keep the discussion going, and your feedback is very much appreciated. So with that, thank you for joining us, and take care, guys.